Guten Tag, meine lieben Freunde. We are here again with being in nothingness. Last video we ended with the question, when therefore does the loved one become a lover in her turn? So we're going to start off with answering that today, a la Sartre. The answer is simple. He says, when she forms the project to be loved. In itself, an other object is never sufficiently strong to occasion love. So, looking at the other as objectified is not strong enough. So, is Sartre saying that we have to see the other as subject to occasion love. So I think he says this right here. If the ideal of love is the appropriation of the other as other, i.e. as a looking subjectivity, this ideal can be projected only on the basis of my encounter with the other subject, not with the other object. So yes. Seduction can only adorn the other object who tries to seduce me with the character of a precious object to be possessed. It may lead me to take great risks to conquer her, but we should not confuse this desire to appropriate an object in the midst of the world with love. Love can only arise within the loved one out of the experience she undergoes of her alienation and of the flight of her being away toward an other. But once again, if this is the case, the loved one will only transform herself into a lover if she plans to be loved. In other words, if what she seeks to conquer is not a body but the other's subjectivity. So I think this sentence that we kind of passed over is really interesting. Love can only arise within the loved one out of the experience she undergoes of her alienation and of the flight of her being away toward an other. So for Sartre, our encounter with another is always going to be in kind of the situation of a look, right? A look from the other subject. That's going to create alienation within us, which, is anxiety producing and full of anguish. But I think because this is a true other, and Sartre doesn't necessarily mention this, but he's talking about what is happening in love with the subject other. There is eros. It makes me think of Byung-Chul Han, who says that we lack a true other in our modern world because we are not necessarily sort of struck by this radical difference. And Byung-Chul Han could say that because we're not allowing ourselves to be in the thick of our freedom as a being for another, which will cause us alienation, because the other subject who looks upon us will then take up what we are representing or presenting in the world and sort of filter it through their own mental lens. And we cannot, this is just the state, Sartre says, of the encounter with the other. We cannot necessarily retrieve that or even know that fully, because language breaks down, right? Because then we translate what the other says through the lens, through our mental lens. We can never get inside. We can never experience the interiority of our lover. or a friend or whoever it is, the stranger on the street. And any attempt to try to retrieve, which is impossible anyway, because we can't even know it, but maybe we have some idea. Oh, they think this of us. They think we are a goddess, and we don't like that, because we can't be a goddess continually, right? Like, we have to make lunch and go to work and things like that. Or they think that we're selfish, or that we are ugly, or something like that. And we say, no, this is not what we are. You can't project this on me. But then what happens? We say, no, I'm not ugly, I'm beautiful. But again, then that we're reclaiming it in the context of being an in itself, trying to be a for itself, in itself. All those words with hyphens for Sartre. But that's what, you can't escape this. But that's what true love is. True love is being sort of thrown outside of yourself by the encounter with the other. But it doesn't have to be uncomfortable, or then people would not, all of the people in the world would not fall in love continually, right? There's something about Eros that can hold this alienation, that can hold this difference, that can hold this sort of continually evolving dynamic striking down of oneself and seeing oneself flee. And then the constant attempt to reclaim, or the remaining loitering in the beautiful objectification of our lover, which we, I think also enjoy to some extent. But then that would bring us out of the true love that Sartre says. I mean, for Sartre, we're condemned by our freedom. So many things, our birth and our death are absurd. There is no meaning to the world, but we are completely responsible for making meaning. That's what we cannot avoid, our freedom. And so, if life is like this, then even the best version of love is not going to be radically different. So we have to understand that in Sartre. But in a sense, that means that the lover has to be very courageous. The lover has to be content and calm with understanding what is happening between themselves and their lover, the one loved. That sometimes, and this is why I think, as Sartre says, when we're trying to seduce or be seduced, the object version of ourselves and the other come into play, because we think that we can form the object of ourselves or the other into a precious object, a fascinating object. But this, for Sartre, and I think for many of us, would just mean that we're, playing out a fantasy. It's kind of like the person who says, I'm going to be the most heroic, gentlemanly knight of, whatever chivalry possible. And this girl that I love is going to just fall madly in love with me. Because I know what women want, and they rarely get it, so I'm going to be sort of the golden, gentleman. But the thing is, with that perspective, you are missing out on the very individual subjectivity of the individual woman that, they are pursuing. They are missing out on that. Because they have to look at, they can't say, well, I'm going to become an archetype that women in general want, but what is the specific woman's own project of freedom? And, what does she then thinks she wants or actually wants or needs even as a subject. So this is why, some people can say, I don't know why I failed. I was, I bought her gifts all the time, and I was the type of man that any woman would want. But any woman doesn't exist. According to Sartre, individuals exist. And so you have to, but it's courageous though, to not be able to lead with a persona or an archetype or a mask that, you think will have a high probability of seducing someone. Really, the connection can only be made by actually knowing another person and finding out and being in dialogue and conversation continually, because our projects, might change, right? And so we have to keep up this curiosity with each other in true love as, yourself as a subject and myself as a subject. Because, our projects are constantly being revealed to us and we're constantly choosing. So I think it's a really interesting situation that Sartre is creating with this subject other love. And I think it very much fits. Back to Byung-Chul Han, I think that he says in the modern day that we have lost the other, the subject other that holds the possibility for eros, because maybe like he focuses on technology and social media a lot, and sort of like the selfie and our filters, and he calls us all narcissists. So I think in Han's mind, and correct me if you have a different opinion or thought, or I'm not right on this, but I think it's because in Han's mind, we're also navel gazing, that we're also worried about how people are seeing us and trying to control how people see us, that we're just never being able to encounter an other, So I don't know. I don't think I explained that well. But going on. To love is, in essence, the project to make oneself loved. So it has to be, I think the important thing here is the project. Yes, we can show up as a precious, fascinating object trying to seduce. But, or we show up as a subject other and cast our look, which might make the other uncomfortable or might make the other feel alienated, right? There's this upsurge of energy that we have to be, in a sense, okay with. But it's the other person in their own subjectivity that has to decide they want to take on the project. And that is completely in their individual freedom. What the lover demands, in fact, is that the other, without seeking from the outset to be loved, should have an intuition that is simultaneously contemplative and effective of her loved one as the objective limit to her freedom, as the inescapable and chosen foundation of her transcendence, as the totality of being and the supreme value. The love that is hereby demanded from the other cannot ask for anything. It is a pure commitment without reciprocity. In his demand itself, he is held captive. To the extent that love is indeed a demand to be loved, he is a freedom that wants to be a body. So again, even though, like Sartre says, he focuses a moment on this, that love can only happen between two subjects, we are constantly, and this is what he's talking about here, this movement. It's kind of like the Hegelian movement. There's never you can't stay in one position for too long. Even if you intend it, you're always going to go to the opposite. Well, for Sartre, we are always trying to be in bad faith and flee our freedom. And so, what we want is something impossible from the other. And even when he says, what the lover demands, in fact, is that the other, without seeking from the outset to be loved, should have an intuition that is simultaneously contemplative and effective. I mean, it sounds here like he's kind of bringing up this idea of like our secret wishes that we don't communicate. We just hope that our communication or ourselves will land and they'll take it up as a project. So he says a little further down, again, we encounter here the ideal of love's enterprise, alienated freedom. But it is the person who wants to be loved who, insofar as he wants to be loved, alienates his freedom. My freedom alienates itself in the presence of the pure subjectivity of the other who founds my objectivity. It could not become alienated before an other object. In that form, indeed, the loved one's alienation, which the lover dreams of, would be contradictory, since necessarily the loved one could found the lover's being only by transcending it toward otherworldly objects. Thus, each person in the loving couple, I'm skipping a little bit, wants to be the object for whom the other's freedom alienates itself in an original intuition. But this intuition, which would be love in the true sense of the word, is only a contradictory ideal of the for itself. In consequence, each lover is alienated only to the precise degree to which he or she demands the other's alienation. Love is a contradictory attempt to overcome the de facto negation while at the same time maintaining the internal negation. So, I don't know if I'm completely getting this. Like when he talks about alienation is both, I think, so let me know what you think. I think that alienation is both a natural state, like an appropriate natural state of ourselves in the world with others. But there's also a desire to be alienated from our freedom as an inauthentic, although Sartre would not like that. That's more Heidegger's term. Sartre would feel that's too, moralizing. A bad faith. I don't know why, but why is bad faith not moralizing? I don't know. Alienation can also be a desire to flee from our facticity in bad faith. So, I don't know. That's what I have to offer here. He talks about the threefold destructibility of love, which I think is really interesting. And then he starts to go in with talking about what he calls the second attitude toward the other: indifference, desire, hatred, and sadism, where masochism involves an assumption of guilt. He says that masochism is an attempt not to fascinate the other through my objectivity, but to become fascinated myself by the objectivity for the other. I want to be desired, and I make myself, in shame, an object of desire. But this, I think, is also ultimately failing because we always slip back again into thinking of the other as an object when we try to place ourselves as an object. Like, we think that we're freeing the other to their freedom and their own subjectivity by becoming an object that is desired, that's wanted, that's even shamed. You know, we want the shaming look of our lover. But when we're doing this to ourselves, which now makes me think of like Martin Buber, the I-thou relationship, when we're making ourselves an it and wanting the other person to be a thou, we make the other person into an it. So I think I'll stop there, but let me know how you all maintain the subjectivity of both yourself and your lover in a relationship. I'm curious. I'd like to know. Sartre thinks it's kind of impossible to remain, but I think you can, with practice, raise the percentage of this subject with subject. And I think that that's like a raising of consciousness, and that's what we're all sort of here to do, even if it's uncomfortable and it puts us in vulnerable situations.